morning. My name is Chris Thorne, and welcome back to this bonus edition of the Making Work Work interview series, where I interview guest experts that are helping people to be happier at work so that businesses can grow and thrive. Now, in this special bonus interview, I'm going to interview two amazing people who know the secret to unlocking potential and performance in everyone from Olympic athletes to senior leaderships and teams in your business. So you won't want to miss this. It all boils down to one thing, and that's confidence. Because regardless of who you are, wherever you're from, your age, your gender, whatever it is, we all know that if you have confidence, those people tend to excel in life and achieve more. And if you don't have confidence, it can be really debilitating. It can really stop you in your tracks from taking the actions that help you to unleash the potential and the performance within. Now, I'm delighted to introduce you today, my two fantastic guests. I've got Kerry Hearsey and Adam Hulme, who are both co-hosts and creators of the Two Coach Confidence podcast, which specializes in bringing people together from all walks of life to share their knowledge, skills, and experience about this mystical and subjective topic that we call confidence. Just to give you a little bit of background on Adam and Kersey. So Adam, after nearly 20 years working in operations, project and senior leadership roles within supply chain management in nuclear power plants, Adam now powers up people, and he works with women, senior professionals in the public sector to give them the clarity, confidence, and self-belief they need to do great things. Kerry is herself a gold and silver medalist and championship field hockey player and has worked with elite Olympic and professional athletes for over 20 years. These insights into working with proven medal winners and teams, both in the US and abroad, has given her a unique insight into how to get the best from people in terms of their potential and their performance. And she now works with business and education leaders to achieve success by unlocking the other key to confidence, which is their mindset. Adam and Kerry, welcome. Good to see you this morning. I know that was a bit of a long intro.
It was amazing. Thank you very much. I'll sit back. It was great.
Well, there's a lot to say, and I figured it was easier to just kind of give people a bit of insight into who you are before we dive deep into this topic of confidence. So, gosh, we've got a lot to cover today, and I know our listeners are going to get some amazing, amazing value. Can I just both ask you, this is such a timely topic now with COVID and lockdown and people rethinking their lives and what they're doing. I mean, how have the two of you found lockdown?
Ladies first, Kerry.
Thank you very much. Never usually this nice, Adam. So do you know what? I think it's like anything in life. It's been definitely a journey. From a personal perspective, it's been an opportunity to sit back and look at my business as a whole and actually look at the opportunities that were out there. I was very much kind of thinking, well, for me, I've just moved everything online. Usually I would see people in my office, and now I'm doing everything virtually, but actually it's just opened up additional collaborations. It's given me the opportunity to reach out, network more. And the same thing, I think, from working with a client perspective, I've seen a lot of anxiety, a lot of discomfort through this, but also some beautiful moments of clarity, of change, of moving out of discomfort into just doing things that they wouldn't usually do, whether it be in business or with their family. So I think it's been one of those chances where people can sit back and reflect, which we haven't always had.
It's a unique opportunity. Adam, what about you?
Yeah, I think similar to Kerry. Bar the obvious immediate kind of challenge that COVID faced and that we all faced. I think I liked the term pause. I think it gave people an opportunity to pause. And that's certainly in the world where I work is one of the things that coaching delivers is an ability to help people take a deliberate pause and see what's going on for them. Because certainly in the business space, whether it's a large organization or an SME, what I definitely have experienced and seen is busy, go all the time. And what this has allowed people to do, whether they've liked it or not, is to take a pause and just really, as Kerry said, sit back and just consider, is the direction of travel I'm going in the direction I deliberately want to go in, or have I just fallen into doing the same thing day in, day out? So for me and my clients, I found this as being a great opportunity to take that pause and refocus, re-clarify, and take some perhaps action that may not have occurred had we not had that pause.
Yeah, and Adam, I mean, what are some of the key sort of themes or insights that you're sort of hearing clients take away from this pause?
That it's something they should have done sooner. And they wish, it hadn't been forced upon them by COVID.
Yeah.
And the regularity moving forward of saying, right, actually, I'm going to plan in a regular pause. Something that's looking forward facing, and something that they'll introduce as, the norm instead of just go all the time.
Yeah.
That's probably one of the biggest insights I see in terms of clients, and also the reflection for their businesses.
Right.
I think is incredibly important, because again, certainly in an SME space, small to medium enterprises, just to make that clear.
Yeah.
Again, it's not super common for smaller organizations to take a quarterly review, half-yearly review, take their small team, whoever that small team is, even if it's, I use my wife and myself as an example.
Yeah.
We've got a number of other businesses, and to take that and actually sit down and say, where are we right now against where we wanted to be? What does that now look like? How's this affected us? What do we need to change? Just move the steering wheel slightly, so to speak. So even from a business perspective, and also the opportunity that the larger organizations, I've been doing some work with a particular organization that had to mobilize 3,500 people working from home.
Wow.
That's quite a task.
That is, and a very short notice, and obviously having some idea of what's involved in doing that. I mean, that's no small feat, isn't it, for both the IT department and management?
Exactly, and then alongside those new opportunities come new challenges. So if we've now got 3,500 people working at home, some of those individuals may not have partners or family at home, so they are literally at home 24/7 by themselves. So what does that mean for them when they're not engaging with people on a regular basis? So although they've no commute anymore and they haven't got the challenges of those things, which all sounds brilliant.
Yeah.
And they may have started running in the morning, because they can now and they've always wanted to do it.
Yeah,
what does that mean for them when they're sat in an office at home all the time? So it's been a really interesting time for me, I think, and the work that I've been doing, which is wonderful. It's a great place to be.
Oh, wow. I mean, and Kerry, I mean, as a business owner, you said that you mentioned that you had to pivot, you had to adapt your business to be delivered online now. I mean, what sort of challenges are you seeing business owners out there face as they're having to do, something similar in this time of COVID?
I think some of the things are around what Adam was saying, is that, I work heavily in education as well. So although there are a lot of education establishments that now have online learning, but actually to be able to deliver online learning as well as being able to administer some sort of teaching to the kids that are still at home, that's been a challenge for some places. But one of the things that I think's come out from a lot of discussions with clients or CEOs or business leaders is, prior to COVID was the request by a lot of staff to actually work from home. And there was almost this fear of, these people are going to work from home and they're not going to be doing their work, or they're not going to be able to be as reliable, or, and I think that is going to be a massive shift now off the back of this, is to actually see that, do you know what, people have worked from home, they've been absolutely capable of doing so, and in the sense of trying to do these financial or economic cutbacks, this might be one way. I worked with a client who actually 2 weeks prior to COVID was about to sign a new rental agreement for a bigger office.
Wow.
He's now not signed that because actually he realized half of his staff can work from home, so he's saved from that side of things. So I think people are just, as Adam said, it's given people an opportunity to place a magnifying glass on every aspect of business, but also every aspect of life, and giving people this pause, as Adam said, to reflect on what makes them fulfilled, what they love, what makes them tick, what's important. So I think it's been an interesting time of change.
Yeah. Well, and just so our listeners kind of have a bit of a sense of who you are and how you came to be, what you're doing now. So, Kerry, I mean, you started off, played hockey,
Mm.
medals, did championships. Then you got into you've done nutrition, you've done exercise, you've done a lot of coaching around wellness with Olympic athletes. I know you've some really interesting things. I mean, you've written books for children on mental health and well-being, which I thought was fascinating. And you combine hypnotherapy and shamanism and neuro-linguistic program with your coaching. I mean, how did you begin this journey to become a coach, and what did you face along the way?
So for me, I've being in the sporting world, I've experienced some sort of coaching element from the age of, I guess, 16. So I came into hockey fairly late, but when I started playing hockey at 16, I had a trial with England when I was 17 or 18, and then from that actually went over as a scholarship athlete to America for 4 years, which at the time not many people did. And so it was a real opportunity leaving home and not knowing anybody in a different country. Again, it really placed a reliance on my coach actually that was there. And being in America, one of the biggest things and the best and most grateful gifts I've ever received there was just the opportunity and the openness to just make mistakes, actually try anything. Don't be afraid to fail and just make mistakes, because that's where your biggest growth and learn is going to come from.
Yeah.
And I suppose even, we look at the growth mindset, and it's a term that's used, I would suggest, in the last 5 years more so than ever. But it's actually a term that was really implemented and impactful in my life from the age of 18, 19 years old.
Wow.
And changed my coaching practice. So coaching started off out there. When I came back to the UK, it was always important for me to give back to the sport here. I did my teacher training. And from that teacher training, I was just fascinated by the psychology of people, about what makes people tick, what makes some people achieve things that they want to. I was someone that struggled, so I struggled with mental health at a younger age, which impacted my life. And it was kind of having an intelligence of, I know I've got all of these things, but there's parts of me that are not necessarily working in the way that I want. That made me curious. And as the best coaches, as Adam and I always talk about, the best coaches are curious coaches. And so the curiosity started with myself, and then kind of, okay, how can I use this learning to be able to help somebody else? So yeah, that's where my path started. And that's where then last year I met Mr. Hulme. So that's
wow. I mean, what difference has coaching made to you personally?
For me personally, so my biggest coaching experience from a personal development perspective was for about 10 years. And it's interesting, that's what got me into hypnotherapy. So I received hypnotherapy. The therapist at the time for 10 years was also somebody that was kind of used different psychological perspectives, models, coaching practices. She'd been out to the Amazon and studied shamanism. She was doing NLP. She did CBT. She, looked at all different aspects. And that was really kind of, okay, there doesn't have to be one size fits all. It's really about the person that's in front of you. How are you coaching the individual based on what they're displaying in that moment? And that might change from what's happened the previous week. So Alexia, she's incredible. She's someone that I actually spoke to yesterday, weirdly enough, just in terms of catching up. And she's been a fantastic mentor for me. But I'm someone that believes that you have to continue that coaching practice. We're never fully developed. So I continued coaching. I have different coaches. I've got a business coach now. I even have coaching and marketing, because I know it's an area that I need development on,
Yes.
And then if all ends, I just ring Ads up, and he's like my coaching friend. So it's a win-win.
Oh, that's perfect. Oh gosh, I mean, and Adam, I mean, you had what a lot of people would have thought, oh, he's got this amazing career and job, he's got a lovely family, and then you gave it all up to become a coach. How did that happen?
So I would say, like, I'm just kind of like a regular guy. I started off, my dad worked at the same power station, and he came home one day and he said, "Now then, son, there's a job in them stores." And it was one of those industries that once you've got a job, you don't, it was, once you're in there, son, it was like that look in his eye, like, once you've got a job at the power plant, son, you are made for life.
Oh, You're not
I
going
was like,
anywhere.
yeah, this is great. I don't have to work weekends anymore. I was a travel agent before that, believe it or not.
Oh, okay.
And then, so yeah, applied on a 6-month temporary contract, and 20 years later, I'd done a number of roles on the actual power station, always in supply chain, inventory, logistics, contracts, services, all in that arena. And then just slowly but surely just started working my way up. I did my professional qualification in supply chain management later, I think sort of maybe in my mid-20s, so that became a member of the Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply. And then when I got my first, what would probably be seen as a more senior leadership role, as with many large organisations, large global corps, I was sheep dipped in some leadership training.
And what was that like?
It was, I'd had in other organisations, I'd had leadership training, but this was significantly different. This was a 3-week course, 1 week full residential, so away from my family.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah, away from the station, the business. It was fully submersive, if you like. So a significant investment by the business, and there was a coach on that course, and they delivered what would now be seen as the basics of NLP. So we were learning delete, distort, generalize. We were learning the world, and I was like, "Wow, what is this? Why do I not know about this stuff?" And from that moment on, so that was probably about 12 years ago, I made a real connection with this coach, asked him if he would informally mentor me outside of work. And it was Steve, his name is, and Steve was the catalyst for me starting to fall in love with personal development. And from that moment on, I just asked, what books to read, what to watch. And literally still to this day, the same as Kerry, if I am not with my children or my wife, I am doing something personal development wise, whether that's reading, writing, watching, doing some form of personal development. I've done UPW, so I've done Tony Robbins's 4-day.
And did you walk over hot coals?
Yeah, all that
wow, that's incredible.
I'm just incredibly passionate about learning how human beings are in order to be able to support my clients, and that never really stops because there's always something
new to learn.
Look at, to learn. And like Kerry, then I did my coaching qualification. So I was fortunate enough that the business that I was in, I went, the coaching school I used had like a 2-day, come and have a look and see what you think to this thing called coaching. So I did that, went back into the business and said, look, would it be okay to do that? Incredibly fortunate, the business said yes. I did my coaching qualification. Through that, obviously, you've got to coach people. And then started taking clients whilst I was still working full time. And then my wife and I sat down and she said, Adam, why don't you just do this full time? I felt like a bit of a fraud in some respects because I was helping people do things that they kind of, going after what they wanted. But I was like, I've got this really nice.
But you're not doing what you wanted.
Exactly. So June last year, I left the organisation and I've been coaching full time since.
Oh, amazing. Wow. I mean, of course, the question I think we all want to know is how did you two meet and come together to put this podcast together?
So Adam and I, through a mutual friend called Leona, she is the CEO of what's called Mums in Business International, and we had been doing some work with them. And Leona said, you two should connect. I think you guys could have some shared interests. So I went up and drove up to Crewe, where Adam is. We met in some random coffee shop, and we were just saying before, actually, whenever we tell this story, it sounds very dodgy. I feel like I need to make it more sinister by the moment. But we sat down and had a chat and just kind of hit it straight off. Obviously, our love of coaching, our love of self-development. I think most days we'll be sending each other a text message going, have you watched this on Netflix, or have you read this book? That's kind of the relationship that Adam and I have got. So we met in Crewe, and I just said to him, I'm really interested in starting this podcast. I think it would be great as a male-female lead approach because confidence is different from both perspectives.
Right.
And yeah, and that's where it was. We didn't have a clue how to do it, but we were just like, well, why not? Let's figure it out and let's go with it. And the rest, as they say, is history. So that's
Oh, fantastic. Oh, and it's obviously been a great collaboration, hasn't it?
it's
And
been awful, if I'm going to be honest.
oh
with you.
well.
The editing in particular hasn't been up to scratch.
Oh,
Very.
we'll have to do a behind the scenes at some point to let people know about the joys of doing a podcast. Oh wow! Well, and I mean, what were some of the because you said, obviously, look, we didn't know how to do this. We had to kind of figure it out. I mean, what were some of the challenges that you faced in figuring it out?
And do you know what? I think that's the funny part about this is that actually our podcast is all about confidence.
Yep.
One of the biggest things that we kind of sat down and said, okay, what are we hoping to get out of this podcast? And we knew that there would be what we call a golden thread. There would be kind of things that people would say that would be through each episode, and there would be things that we are learning and developing and questioning and challenging as good coaches do. But the interesting thing was we both kind of epitomized what confidence was, because we just kind of went with it. We just figured out, okay, well, our definition at that point, I'm going to say, because it's changed, our definition at that point of confidence was to be okay in any situation, regardless of what it was. We thought it was quite environmental. And so we thought, well, we'll be okay with the podcasting thing. We'll figure it out. And that's yeah, apart from my editing issues, the reason Adam's bringing that up is because in last week's episode, I edited it, not edited it, should I say, and Adam called himself a few expletives.
Yeah, some savoury,
and I left those in.
And I got
a bit of flavour to the podcast.
WhatsApp message on a Saturday night from a client I've got in Canada saying, "Do you realise that you've left the bloopers in?" I was like, "What are you talking about?" Like, Kerry screens these before. Like, Kerry does. I do like the notes and the things that accompany it. Then we record the intros together after we've done the actual podcast. And yeah, we had a little giggle, didn't we, Kerry? It was all fun. And it still makes us laugh now.
You know what? That was the best piece of marketing ever, because we just put up that we had bloopers in it, and the amount of downloads that evening was incredible. So,
I was going to say, because people love the bloopers because it's authentic, it's real, and I think you raise a great point about the definition of confidence there in terms of it being, it's just knowing that whatever happens to you, you're going to survive the experience, aren't you? That you're not going to die. That emotionally you can handle it, wouldn't you? I mean, how do you think most people define confidence, Adam?
That's a great question, because that's one of the questions we ask our guests when they come on. And I think one of the things that's coming to mind for me personally, in my experience and the people I've worked with, is we don't actually spend much time thinking about what our definition is, because it's so subjective.
Yeah.
We've probably got a subconscious definition without any thought attached to it. And that will depend on where you've been in life, how your environment's been, what you've experienced in terms of maybe your upbringing, your friends, your work environment, all those sorts of things. So I think in terms of that question is incredibly subjective, and that was one of the reasons that Kerry and I wanted to look at this, because it is so subjective. Every single person has a different definition of what it is and what it isn't. And Kerry and I use this term, the secret sauce. So what we're trying to extract,
what is the secret sauce?
Yeah, what is the secret sauce?
That's the question, yeah.
And that's it's a lovely place to kind of hang out and talk and open up discussions. We've been down. We're on I think episode 15 now, but there's only 6 out, so we've recorded a number of them, and we're in this place now where we've talked about emotional intelligence, we've talked about fear, we've talked about comparison, we've talked about just all sorts of different areas that you come off. Sometimes Kerry and I come off the podcast and go, I had no idea that was, even possibly attached to confidence, that was ever something that you would think of. And it's the more time we spend in this arena and topic, the more we're realizing that its impact is universal. It's impacted us all at some point.
Yeah.
But also now, as we transition into an online much more online focused as a species, if you like.
Yeah.
The impact that that is having on younger individuals.
Yeah.
But also when we talk about, I know today we're talking about the workplace, but your ability in the workplace to say, do you know what, I am going to go for that job. I am going to put in for it. I'm going to apply for it. I am going to ask for that pay rise in my appraisal. I might challenge that senior leader. So it's a very, very, very broad topic that touches us all at some point. I know that's a bit of a long-winded answer, Chris, but
No, that's great. I mean, to me, it's a little bit about, I mean, my own definition of confidence, I think, has changed in the last few years as well, because I used to see confidence as almost like it was almost like a state of arrival. You know, you had confidence, you had a certain level of skills or knowledge or years of experience. And actually what I'm kind of figuring out is that it's more, I think, about, it's kind of being, it's courageous, and it's being able to take action in spite of fear. Because the big ironic lesson I've learned really is that, you know, we always think, oh, well, I'll do that when I feel confident, but actually the way you get the confidence is by doing the very thing that you are most afraid of doing. And it's getting comfortable with being uncomfortable.
yeah, there's a phrase. Sorry, Kerry, go on.
Oh no, I was about to say that there's one of the books that Adam and I have been reading around this area is the Claire Shipman book, The Confidence Code. And I think one of the pieces that stands out about her definition of confidence, and she says confidence means having enough belief in our own abilities that we become active. And I think it's that line there, we become active.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
The thing that Adam and I were saying before, like our definition around we would be okay in any situation, we would think is confidence, but it's probably more on the line of optimism, whereas the confidence piece is this bridge, is this gap between thought to action. And as you've just said before, is maybe overcoming some of those fears and adversities in order to become active, and having the confidence to do that. So that's Adam, always you I think you were about to say what your favorite quote is. Go for it, Ads, because it is.
Yeah, so this is one for me that I was working with a coach last year, my coach, the person that I was being coached by.
Yeah.
And he shared a quote by another coach, a chap called Rich Litvin.
I've heard of Rich Litvin. Yes, yeah, he's the prosperous coach.
The prosperous coach.
Very well known and successful coach. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, he's a wonderful coach. But he I'm pretty sure it is Rich's phrase, but confidence is a result and not a requirement.
Oh, now that's powerful.
And that for me is still probably one of my favorite definitions, that you don't need it to get going. And Kerry and I we never talk about like the blind leading the blind when we were doing the podcast.
It is.
It was, and it still is, yeah. Like, but we knew this was an area that we both were passionate about. We both supported numerous people with. But we didn't need confidence to create a podcast. What we've done is every single episode, and it's still rough around the edges, but that's part of the fun. We know sometimes, like Kerry's going, like, obviously if you're listening to this now, but Kerry sometimes points at me to go, I have a mic, and she's like, speaking to the mic. Like, and that's just the way it is. And we're happy with that. We're comfortable at it. It's how it is. We're not going to edit that out. Some bits we do edit out because I use too many expletives. But it is. I think it's just a beautiful phrase, that confidence is a result and not a requirement.
Oh, I love that. And it's so closely tied to things like, achieving our goals and resilience as well. I mean, confidence and resilience go hand in hand, don't they? Being able to bounce back when things don't go so well. I mean, what sort of habits do you have on a kind of day-to-day basis that, help you to kind of be confident and bounce back?
Do you want me to go, or you?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. You. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. Sorry, Chris. So for me, I meditate daily. That's a practice that I've done for a number of years on and off, but I've just done. In fact, I meditated before this.
Yeah.
I've just done 102 days consecutively back to back without missing a day.
Brilliant.
And for me, meditation is something that I found gives me that pause that I talked about earlier. It allows me to kind of just sit back wherever I am in the world or wherever I am in that particular day and just take some time just to disconnect from everything. That's definitely one thing. I use something called the 5-minute journal, which is something I found from Tim Ferriss. So that's Pretty much as soon as I wake up in the morning, or as soon as I can, depending upon what I'm doing with the kids.
Yeah.
3 things that I'm grateful for in that moment. What would make today amazing? And then in the evening, it's 3 things that were great today and what could have made today better.
Oh, amazing.
So it is literally 5 minutes, which is one of the things I enjoyed about it, because I've tried journaling.
Yeah.
I've tried the Brendan Burchard planner, which is quite a big thing.
Yeah.
So that for me works. But also the work that we've been doing on the podcast, like I've learned a lot about what confidence is and is not.
Yeah.
And spending some more time really reflecting on that has helped tremendously.
Wow.
Even with my clients that I've now got since we've been doing the podcast,
Yeah.
helped tremendously. Having conversations with different people all about the same topic has been incredibly enlightening for me.
Oh, amazing. I was gonna say, I've recently started to get into meditation myself, and I'm really starting to notice the benefits of having that space to just kind of disconnect from your thoughts and just kind of observe and be quiet. And I can't recommend that enough. Carrie, what about you? What habits have you got?
I think that's one of the things about the podcast, actually, because one of the things we're really aware of is that we're able to ask people to just consider changing certain things. I think there's a lot of self-help books which probably predominantly say the same. That's one of the things we were talking about in a recent podcast. And sometimes if you're not in a great space of maybe it's confidence or something else, you can be reading the things that you are, in inverted commas, meant to be doing. And if you're not doing them or don't feel the repercussions of those, we can often beat ourselves up. So it's about finding out, like Adam's just said, trying and testing different things to see what works for you. So I do meditation, not necessarily on a daily basis like Adam does it, but I really enjoy it when I do it. The same things with exercise, whether it be yoga or going out. Journaling is a big thing. So the Julie Cameron book, The Artist's Way, is being a big one, but creativity as a whole is a big one for me. So I like to paint. I like to obviously write the children's books and illustrate those. So that's been a thing for me. Not so much that it's developing my confidence, but it's developing a brain space where I can actually do the other things that I need to do to be confident. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Reading. So can't really sit background here. I've got a lot of books, but I do love to read. I've just read the Sheryl Sandberg Leaning book, which has been really interesting. So yeah, for me, it's about being in the moment. It's about having an awareness of yourself to say, what do I need today?
Yeah.
So I'm all about consistency and habits, but I sometimes think they can put a lot of pressure on people, which doesn't work in their favor. So for people that are anxious, they will constantly live in a question world. So they're constantly questioning themselves.
Yeah.
And I'm really aware that as self-development coaches, one of the things we say to them is take some time out and question yourself. Well, they're already questioning themselves, and that's adding anxiety. So it's just working with myself or working with an individual to say what works for you right now in this moment. Go with that.
Yeah. Oh, that's brilliant advice. I mean, let me ask you, I mean, one of the books I've read recently that's really been quite pivotal for me is a book by a guy called James Clear called Atomic Habits.
Atomic Habits, great book.
Absolutely love it. And he really breaks down the whole thought process behind change and how you can use habits to drive change, because you just do the tiniest actions that get you to show up and do things that you might, like if you want to start exercising, you might just start by getting up in the morning and getting your kid on, and then the next day you actually turn up to the gym, or the next day beyond that you actually do something for 5 minutes, and it just builds. But it's kind of about creating a new identity that you then start to see yourself as confident. Would you agree with that?
I think he terms it the domino effect. Is that again what we often do is we're kind of unrealistic when it comes to goal setting or changes that we want to make, and we'll just we go from A to Z in 0.2 seconds, wanting everything to be changed there and then. And his term is that if you just do that one thing, it will have a knock-on effect to the next habit or the next change you want to make in your life. So it has been that, and so there's a cumulative, really. I think it's that somebody calls it a friend of mine calls it a toolbox. Is having all of those tools in your toolbox and knowing that one day those things can work and on other days they might not, but because you've built up your toolbox, you've got things to be able to select from it.
Amazing. Great stuff. Can you just sort of talk me through, I mean, as you both work with people and you're sort of taking them on this journey really from where they are at the moment, maybe not feeling quite so confident about a certain aspect of their life, to kind of coming out the other side and finding themselves doing things they never thought possible. How do we even kind of begin that journey? So, I mean, I'm thinking this in terms of like, if I was to start with an individual, and then maybe we will look at, you know, how would I work with someone, say, if I was a manager and I had a team member or something? I mean, where do you even start that journey? Adam, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, so I've been in that place, in various leadership roles. And I think it's really important for leaders, just exactly what Kerry's just said there, is that we oftentimes have really, really, really high expectations of ourselves. And we're in an instant gratification. I think that's the right word. We're in this place in the 21st century now as human beings where we want things now and we want it quick because we've got access to so much now.
Absolutely.
You want a film, you go online. You want a piece of information, you Google it. You want this, you know, you can get click and collect. Amazon are delivering now the same day that you're ordering. You know, you can order it at 8 a.m. and it's going to be with you by 4. So we're in this world that is incredibly fast paced. But when it comes to us and leadership, we often forget that, like, where is the individual in front of me right now? And we've got to explore that as a leader. It's got to be about being present and listening to the person that's in front of you. For me, this is where I start with all my clients, or when I used to be in those leadership roles. It's understanding where are they right now. The language that they're using is incredibly important. So Kerry and I, you know, it's one of the things that we both heard lots of, and we all have heard, I'm just not a confident person. So that could be the starting point. I'm just not a confident person.
Yeah.
And I think we need to remember with leaders as well, is they're not necessarily trained coaches or individuals that have got a skill set to support them with some of these conversations. So I'm throwing that caveat out there now that if that's you, don't worry. If somebody's sat in front of you saying, I'm just not a confident person, and like, well, what do I do with that? Like, this individual's got immense capability. I see it in them, but now I'm expected to get
it out of it.
A confident person.
Yeah.
There's got to be, that person's got to recognize that they are saying that to themselves and the impact that that's having on them and their potential actions, or not, as the case may be, because if they're telling themselves they're not a confident person, they're probably not taking many actions.
Yeah.
And then if they want to do something about that, then we start with, well, how will you know when you are? So what will you be doing? What will you be saying? What will other people be saying? How will you be feeling? So it's really sort of to break it right down. And I know this is really cliche, the whole break it down, put it into steps. But
it's so true, because otherwise you can't get your head around it otherwise, can you? It's just an idea.
But then it's focusing on that with the support of that leader, for argument's sake, to say, okay, so what about presentations are easy ones, because they're oftentimes, this is a really easy example to use. And you know, if you've never given one in a room full of people and you're expected to, that can be quite overwhelming at times.
Can be a bit daunting if you're not doing it. Yeah.
Especially if you're fairly new into an organization, or you're still fairly, I'll use the word junior, maybe less experienced is probably a better word, or a couple of words. So helping that individual break that right down. So it could just be that they do the presentation to the leader. Could just be they do it to their immediate team because they're familiar with them, and take some critique. So I think that for me is where I would start if I was a leader, or if I was still in that leadership post. It's just helping that individual say it out loud. Yeah, I'm not really confident about this. And then exploring how they would know when they were. For me is where I would start, Chris. I'd probably spend a bit more time.
Yeah, well, it does sound simple, but it is really
point.
Well, that's it, because until people know what it is, they can't really figure out how they're going to get there, or how will I know I've arrived if I can't define it? And the thing is most people, they can probably define confidence, or they can even describe, this is a confident person. These are the sort of things that this person does, the behaviors, or what they say, or how they hold themselves, or all these things that make someone confident. And they can get a hold of the idea of it, and then it's translating it into how do they do that. And there's a load of, this is one of the great things about NLP, which I'm sure Kerry would agree, is that there's so many great techniques, aren't there, in terms of helping people to to, you know, hone in on how we can adjust the language we speak, we use to talk to ourselves, or, you know, how we hold ourselves, our physiology. And I mean, Kerry, how would you kind of speak to that? What are some of the techniques or things that you would look at with someone on this?
I mean, it's kind of it reminds me of a client conversation recently, actually, and in terms of team dynamics, and kind of that from an NLP perspective, the map is not the territory, in the sense that actually we sometimes get so embroiled in our own thoughts and feelings and emotions and what's going on that we fail to step back and look at the perspectives. And often when we say to people, standing in other people's shoes, you're actually still standing in their shoes, but looking through still with your lens. What you need to do is stand in their shoes and look through it with their lens to understand. So, for example, from a confidence piece, I was talking to a client, and she was explaining that actually she's felt that she's not been recognized, and she is feeling overwhelmed at the moment with everything that's going on from a work perspective. She isn't enjoying her role. She doesn't feel like she's getting the recognition. And I said to her, okay, when was the last time you went up to your CEO and patted them on the back and said, well done, you're doing a great job? And she's like, well, I don't. I said, oh, okay. So when did you last go and do that with your manager and say, do you know what? I know you've got 2 kids and you're doing a great job handling everything. And she was like, well, I haven't. And we kind of talked about that transactional analysis piece of parent, adult, child, and how she was responding and things. But from a confidence piece, bringing in Dave Brailsford, we always look for the 1% marginal gains about how we can improve. But when we get closer to the top, that 1% is so small that we often don't see the journey that we've taken, or the strides that we've made. So part of the NLP is actually just almost going back to that beginner's mindset, is to say, right, let's take this back to a blank canvas. How can you like look at this whole position, your confidence, whatever it is that you're addressing at this time, to move yourself forward? What are you telling yourself? What story are you telling yourself right now? How can you, is that a generalization? Can you change this to be a different perspective or a different approach? And sometimes that's all it needs. It just needs somebody to hold that magnifying glass on it in a different light, and they start to, you know, step back and think, oh, actually, yeah, you're right. I've not thought about it like that.
You know, and it takes courage, even, I think, for people when they start coaching with us to even, you know, start to answer those questions in terms of, you know, what they want and what it would look like if they got there. Because as soon as you raise that, you answer that question, it obviously opens up the possibility of it not happening as well. So it takes courage and vulnerability, which we were speaking about earlier, to really be courageous enough to kind of to really be honest with yourself and then start to look at that. So it sounds like there's a huge piece here around raising self-awareness initially, isn't it? Because until we know what the blind spots are and where we're headed, you know, what is that well-formed outcome, and that outcome we're trying to seek, you know, we really can't even begin to figure out a strategy or a way to get there.
I think also one of the things that Adam and I were talking about recently is the piece around creating the environment in which to flourish and harness confidence.
Oh, tell me more about that. Yes.
So obviously we've just been chatting there about kind of from a team perspective, but one of it could be, okay, if a CEO is not open to being vulnerable and not open to addressing the flaw, to say, actually, I want you to give me your ideas, and they feel threatened in some way. So from a leadership perspective, we're wanting them to be more courageous and have, you know, more vulnerability to open up the floor. But likewise, in the boardroom, we were explaining that sometimes it might be where somebody's not putting their hand up to say, actually, I know the answer to this, because they're not confident. Or it could be something's a real issue and there's a real problem, and somebody in that boardroom has the answer, but because they haven't got confidence, or maybe they've been put down in the past, or they've got preconceived ideas, they're not putting their hands up. You know, one of the things from the Sheryl Sandberg book, 4% of Fortune 500 companies are women in terms of CEOs. So there's a strong chance in the room, if it's male-led, then they are tending to lean towards men to answer the questions.
Oh, wow.
With that awareness, then actually, can you encourage more women to step up and answer more questions? If you know that, actually encourage more of the women to step up, create that flourishing, create that environment where it's comfortable for people to share their ideas and thoughts and to build that confidence.
Gosh, I mean, and that, you know, and the whole, that's such a great a great point. And it raises that whole impact of what we call culture, that whole way of being in an organization, and, just thinking about the people that you've helped, and your ideas around how people develop this aspect of confidence. I mean, what would you tell people in leadership in terms of how to create this sort of safe space, where people feel that, they can be honest about, look, I don't feel particularly confident doing that presentation, or, well, I might actually need some help learning that particular software package to, deliver this, this piece of work or whatever. How do we create that environment? Adam, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah. Always sounds dead simple, doesn't it?
It does, until you actually are in there.
There's usually some form of appraisal process or one-to-one process or performance management process, and I think that's where I would start to introduce language around confidence. And one of the things that I think I experienced throughout that 20-year period is in my previous career, and with other organizations. So I was working in supply chain. I've been fortunate enough to work with multiple teams globally. But we oftentimes, or what I oftentimes see with if you like, the actual documentation that supports the activity, we don't actually include it. So we'll go on a leadership course, or a management course, or a time management course, but then what we don't do is take those fundamental skills and practices and introduce them into our business documentation to support those people. So I've just done, 3-week fantastic leadership course all around maps of the world and delete, distort, and generalize, and I've learned all this new stuff. But then I lose it because it's not actually part of my day-to-day activity. It's not part of something I'm expected to do.
Right.
I think introducing the confidence conversation as part of your one-to-one, or as part of your appraisal, and it could just be, where didn't you feel confident in the past 12 months? It could be just something as simple as that.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be complicated.
Yeah. And that individual will tell you, they will know immediately where they didn't feel confident. Because those experiences that we've had discomfort with leave a little bit of
they leave a mark, don't they?
A scar. And even if it has been a meeting that you've come out and gone, that was horrendous, that was awful, you'll know. Yeah. So I think a really great starting point is to actually introduce in your documentation some really simple questions about this. Would be, for me, just a really simple, it's not going to take you long, it's not intrusive, it's not disrespectful to ask those sorts of questions, but it's a step, it's that move forward. And then you can start from there. I would suggest, is there a theme that sits across the answers in those questions? So there are a lot of people saying, when you wheel me into that boardroom, it's awful because they don't know anybody, they don't introduce themselves, and I get, and all of a sudden you can say, right, so everybody walking into the boardroom struggles. Right, what do we need to do there? Do we need to stop the meeting and everybody to introduce themselves and say, hey, we realize this might be a little bit daunting for you. Don't worry, grab a glass of water, a cup of tea, whatever you want.
Yeah.
And bring them at ease. Really simple. But you've got to recognize that there's something there first that people are struggling with.
Yeah.
And I think that comes back to what we were saying before about the CEO needs to have that vulnerability and that awareness piece to address that there are confidence issues in the room.
And Kerry, you just briefly touched on earlier the impact of, obviously people not speaking up and not having the confidence, and particularly the fact that there's obviously a gap between the number of women in the boardroom and men. And we were talking earlier about, just the impact of things like culture and gender and, all sorts of different we're starting to kind of delve into kind of diversity and inclusion type issues now. But what sort of impact does that make on confidence in an organization?
It's interesting. We've even had a couple of guests on who are siblings as well. So we've looked at it from a sibling perspective.
Oh, like firstborn, secondborn sort of position?
Yeah.
Oh, fascinating.
And we've also, as you just started to talk about, we've kind of addressed this and started to ask the question around, what are some of the myths to do with how people perceive confidence in men over women. I think one of the things that Adam will hopefully touch on is from his own perspective and his own kind of awareness of working with other people is that I think now more than ever, men are coming forward and expressing their emotions. Whereas in the past, that's not necessarily been something that people could do. So there's been a perception that and I'm generalizing, all men are confident and women are the people that kind of struggle with confidence. And then for a while, if you're looking at even body image, they had it at different levels. So for women, it was to do with weight, so too much weight or too little weight. And with men, it was not being defined enough in terms of muscular structure, or if they haven't got six-pack abs, or if they aren't broad enough. So we're starting to see that there are different distortions, different myths around what confidence is. And how that then can play an impact into business. Okay, so if they're not feeling body confident, is that having an impact on actually them going to present in front of everybody else? Well, yeah, it probably is, because they don't feel confident in themselves. So there's a big area of discovery when it comes to, I think Adam was just saying, change your descriptions around, can you tell me when you haven't been confident, but also expand on that. Okay, what if we were to able to support you in building your confidence? How much of an impact would that have on your business and your life? Ask that question of your employees, and you'd be surprised actually what they're longing for is to have that confidence and is to make those next steps, but it just needs the support.
Wow. And we know so much about employee engagement has to do with helping to meet people's needs, in terms of why they're at work and giving them a sense of purpose and mission. But people want a chance to be developed and to learn and to grow as well. That's hugely important. I mean, it sounds like there's a real business case here. It might be hard to quantify in some cases, but not having confident employees could make a real impact on your bottom line.
Yeah, Chris, there's no doubt about that for me. I've been speaking about this on the podcast for a while now, and there is absolutely no doubt in my mind that organizations are missing a trick, is putting it politely.
Yeah.
With ideas, and it could be ideas that could create more revenue. And there's that, but there is definitely also the piece around improvement areas, natural waste in the business, that are not too difficult to introduce or implement either.
Yeah.
If they don't feel as though they've got a safe space to share those ideas and actually take the action to introduce them, then there's and that is actually covered in the book that Kerry mentioned. They actually talk about that as a specific thing, and there is a direct link between confidence and the bottom line.
Was that the confidence code book that you mentioned earlier? Yes. I was going to say, we'll put that in the resources for the listeners, because that sounds amazing. Yeah. And it's, tell me, can you give me some examples of, when have you seen this really go right? So we start off with people and we take them through this big journey of self-awareness, and then how do we come out the other side? I mean, if I was a listener listening to this, I might be thinking, oh gosh, this all sounds like some great ideas, but can we actually do this? And give me some inspiration.
I'm going to give you one from it's a team and a national governing body that I worked with, but not directly with this team, although I played with some of the girls that were on the team. Yeah. I'm going to say the gold medal winning of England, GB hockey.
Oh, yes, I remember. I watched that game. Yeah.
Collectively for years and years, they they were the underdogs. There was always Argentina, Holland, and even Germany, that were Australia for a very long time in the Sydney Olympics. All of those kind of teams were always epitomizing England. It was one of those similar sort of stories when it comes to football. You'd probably get to a quarterfinal if you were lucky, and that's kind of where it went. But again, look at football. Is there a confidence piece around taking penalties? Probably so.
Could be, yeah.
So you look at it in terms of GB hockey, and their whole dynamic was they understood what their individual roles were. They were confident in their individual roles, but they understood how that worked as a collective dynamic. And it wasn't a hierarchical piece that Danny was at the top as a coach and all of these girls were underneath. It was literally like it was a ball. And actually that ball worked together when everybody was spherical and rolling all in the same direction. They all knew what was happening. If you take one of those pieces out, then you've got a dent in the ball. And so it was about the next game. It was about how do we each support each other to be confident? How do we each develop our individual roles? How do we reflect collectively on what we need to do to build this team to take it to the next stage? So for me, sports a great example of how confidence can work for you and how confidence can work against you. Penalties
Absolutely.
being one of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh gosh, and what a great analogy. I love the metaphor with the ball. That's so powerful. I think people could easily kind of latch on to that. Yeah. Adam, what about you? What successes would you share to inspire our listeners?
I think if I bring it right down to an individual level, which is where I predominantly operate, I've worked with a client now for nearly 9 months, and at the beginning, it was a referral. Somebody referred to me, and the subject of her email to me was, "I want to get out of my own way and start to back myself." That was it. That was the subject line.
Perfect.
So yeah, perfect. So I was like, yeah. So here we go. We're getting in there, and you know, it was a very familiar story. Struggled to introduce herself in particular meetings. She's in a male-dominated environment, engineering based, fairly senior, but struggled to do the whole networking events. So turning up and introducing, you know, walking
the elevator
in,
pitch and
my name's and pretty much just sat on the tables, wishing and hoping that nobody would come up and ask anything. You know, fast forward 9 months, and she now will openly say it's like she is a different person. She will go to a networking event, walk up to anyone in the room and introduce herself, hands straight out, my name's, I work for, this is what I do.
Amazing.
More than happy to start facilitating meetings if there's a need to do so. And that, for me, is a lot of work that she's put in. One thing that came to mind when Kerry was talking then is this takes time and effort. That work that Kerry mentioned there sounded really easy. You know, they got together, they were a ball, and then they all realized that, you know, in order to go in the same direction, they needed to support each other. This isn't something you can just pick up, and I'll use that term again, sheep dip people in. If you really want to create an environment where people feel confident, it's got to be something that becomes the organization. It's an organization that allows people to become confident, are confident, and have the freedom to engage, to support, to talk in meetings. It's not something that you're just going to get from a couple of additions to your leadership course. It's got to be something that you say, we want to create this environment, we want to create this organization where people can flourish and harness their own confidence, and we're going to support them to do that. But it's not just a quick fix. It's not. If I use that one individual, that's 9 months of us working together.
Wow.
Putting ourselves in different situations. We've crafted the situations that we know she's going to go into.
Yep.
We've discussed how she was feeling about it in before, then after, and then we said, right, what's next? What's the next environment we're going to put you in?
Yeah.
So, and she's invested her own time, energy, effort, and money to have me as a coach, but it's taken that, you know, and I'm not saying it would take somebody else 9 months. It could take 6. It could take 3.
Depends on the person.
12. But my point being is, it's not just something that you are going to say, I want to be more confident, and if I just do this one thing, it's going to happen. And I think that's really, really important, especially from a business perspective and an organizational leadership piece.
That's fantastic. And that, that reminds me of something I read recently, which is almost that, you kind of give people little opportunities to kind of put themselves out there in scenarios like what you're discussing, they're a bit out the comfort zone. It's a new scenario, and you sit down and you approach it a bit strategically in terms of, look, okay, how are you feeling going into this? What sort of resources do we need to kind of have in mind? What can I do to get myself in a better state? And what can I proactively do to prepare for that situation? Then obviously go into the situation, do the thing you're afraid of, come out the other side, reflect, have a bit of a pause, and then sort of do the next thing. So it's a bit of a progression, really, isn't it? And I mean, to me, I read so much about what we call creating a coaching culture within an organization. And to me, it's this sort of mindset. You're giving people these little opportunities along the way to grow and develop, but along the way as your manager and your coach, and you're asking those questions to invite them into those conversations to then move them forward.
Yeah, I think there's something there for me, Chris. I'm going to drop my first expletive of some bullshit bingo, like a coaching culture and all this. As soon as people hear that, it's just like, here we go again, another initiative, another thing that's being introduced. And I think my point being is organisations can oftentimes spend an awful lot of money on bringing people like Kerry and myself in and others, or leadership coaches, and they bring them in. But I'm just going to go back to that. But then we don't transition those new skills or those new tools into our everyday practice, so it becomes the thing that we don't lose track of.
Yeah.
Because as new leaders come in and new leaders move out, well, if they've not had the same leadership training, are they further behind? It's got to be something that becomes part of your organizational process. It's not just a one-hit wonder.
Yeah.
Oh, we're going to bring some leadership consultants in. Everyone's now been leadership trained. Yay, the business is fixed. No.
Yeah. It doesn't work like that.
It doesn't, but that's predominantly what I've seen organizations doing, and then they wonder why it's not working, because they've picked it up. They've had all these senior leaders buy into it. And the people below know. They're like, yeah, I've been here for 20, 30 years and I've seen this 4 times now.
Oh, yes. Yes. You can get that sort of change fatigue, can't you? Because you've had too many initiatives come through, and you're right, people do get a bit jaded. It's like, oh gosh, if I just kind of keep quiet, in a month's time or whatever, this will go away. And you've got to really work to get people on board and on side and help them see, the benefits to overcome that resistance to change, to embed these sort of cultures and ways of working in that, don't you? Yeah. I mean, what piece of advice would you give to people that are, just looking to be a bit more confident on a day-to-day basis? Kerry?
Just through the work that we've been really doing with the podcast, and I guess it comes back to those golden thread pieces, there seems to be a lot around how we start our morning is a big one, and the structure that we have around that and the habits that we have around those. There's a piece around the actions that we take. And so I think we were talking before around, it's true that I guess confidence is also on the other side of fear, and that it's being able to sit with the discomfort and knowing that you're going to have to go through that in order to become a little bit more confident. And those processes, then once you've started that step, will start the next step. It's around the action piece. So, we can give you lots of different self-help books. We could give you lots of different podcasts, even our own. But I think the best experience you can always get is the experience that you are putting yourself through. It's about actually putting yourself out there and trying something. As Adam said before, great term is, if it's confidence that you are struggling with presenting, start small, present to one person. And then, okay, once you've mastered that, you don't even need to master it, but once you've done that and you feel a bit more confident, then go to, okay, what's the next environment I'm going to go and work into? And just, we've said it before, it sounds simple to break things down, but that really is the steps that you can start to take. The structure in the morning, how's that helping you? Is it feeding your brain in the right way, or is it actually setting you up to carry on those negative thoughts and feelings? What actions are you going to take through the day to actually push yourself out of that discomfort a little bit to experience the confidence? And then, like Adam said, it's that closed piece as well. Is at the end of the day, actually have that gratitude and say, do you know what? I've made a step today. That's gone really well. And you can actually appreciate and celebrate the steps. Again, that's a piece in the golden thread of where people do actually see the progress they're making. They do reflect on their journey.
Yeah, and oh gosh, that's great, because you just kind of taken us through the whole day, which I think is fantastic in terms of thinking about where we are when we set up in the morning, and just kind of managing that mindset and getting in a good place, and managing our state as we go through the day. And I love the idea as well, is that celebrate the successes. I mean, I heard the idea once of keeping what they called a ta-da list instead of a to-do list. It's ta-da, which is just however minor, just keeping track of all those little achievements along the way, because it's so easy to forget, when you get months down the road and something's not a big deal, and you forget that actually when you started, it kind of was a big deal. So that really, that again kind of builds that confidence, doesn't it? I mean, Adam, are there any sort of top tips? Because we were talking about this client in terms of how, you kind of would map out strategically, okay, what can we do to kind of come into this situation, be more confident? Is there like one top tip you'd give someone?
Oh, one's tough. That's tough.
Well, you could give more than one if you like. I was trying to make it easy for you.
So I think you need to know what you're aiming for. So if there's a few things here. So if you want to become more confident, you've got to commit. To make that decision that said, this is something I'm going to put some focus and effort into and energy into. It's not, otherwise it's going to be half-hearted, and you're going to end up in this spiral loop of, well, I tried and I'm not confident and blah, 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 and it's just going to whiz around. So commit. Yeah, absolutely self-fulfilling prophecy. So commit. I want to be more confident.
Right.
From there, well, how will I know I've got the kind of confidence that I want? So that does take some inner thought time by yourself to sit down and say, right, I will feel more confident when X, Y, and Z. So then you've got some trajectory. I'm doing this fairly quickly. This is part of the work we do.
Yeah, but it gives people.
I could just quite easily just say, just get a coach.
Coaching is kind of like this black box. Like, what do they do? And it's like, I think it's quite helpful if people have a bit of an understanding of what kind of things happen in a coaching session like this. Yeah. So this is part of the work. And sorry, you were saying.
So commit, define.
Commit, define.
And then I think it's pretty much what Kerry's just said there. But one thing that I work on a lot with clients is prepare. So you've committed to doing this thing. I'd like to feel more confident, and we've put some
parameters
around it. Yeah, we've put some language that means something. And again, I won't go into the depths of language, but we're making sure the language is positive, it's not negative, and why that's important, all this kind of good stuff. And then we're like, okay, so I also need to understand when I'd like to be there.
Yeah.
So we're committing, we're defining, we're preparing, and then we need to know when it is we're expecting to arrive at that place. But the preparation is something that has come out loud and clear with all the guests.
Yeah.
I heard
it is just, again, I know it sounds simple, but these are the things that people don't do.
And in fact, there's a lot. That's it. There's a lot of podcast guests that said, when we've asked them when is a time when you haven't been confident, it links back to the times where they haven't been prepared.
Yeah.
You're exactly right. That's great point.
Yeah, I actually heard, I'm trying to remember the podcast now, but I actually heard a great quote from a guy who used to be like a former FBI hostage negotiator. And he was saying that it was something like, you don't rise to the level of your abilities, you sink to the level of your preparation. And I thought, ooh.
Yeah.
Because if you practice and you prepare, you just kind of go into default mode, don't you? And you just do in that situation. Oh, this is amazing stuff. I mean, is there anything that you're particularly working on or kind of looking into at the moment that our listeners would be interested in? Apart from the next podcast, obviously, which is coming up soon.
Well, there's a few things. One is that Adam and I are starting to link with companies, HR, to be able to go and actually deliver these styles of workshops into businesses so that they can understand the importance of the confidence piece. We're writing our confidence course as well. So we're starting to write a course around this.
Fantastic.
An online course that people can build into. Ads?
And I've been reliably informed by Kerry, we're writing a book.
There you go. Whoa. In black and white. That's why I made you say it.
It's out there now. You've committed.
Yeah. And I know we're probably running short on time, Chris, but there's one thing that I'm really passionate about that we've not really touched on, and it's our younger people and the importance of having a conversation, especially if we're talking and getting into social media, which again has come up time and time again on the podcast.
Yeah.
And it's incredibly important that we as parents, or, if you're in the education system, trying to bring this conversation up, trying to get it on the table if you are in the education system, that you know, we need to start working and helping our younger human beings and the people that we care and love so much and that we're responsible for, that they understand what confidence is and what it's not, and the impact that some of the way in which we're now is normal, the way we're living. And I probably won't get this quite right, but we oftentimes compare somebody else's highlight reel to our sort of, you know, day that hasn't been great. And that can have an impact on just, if you like, life confidence. Like, well, look at these people are doing all this amazing stuff and I'm scrolling through and look at all this amazing stuff that they're doing and I'm not. I'm sat at home binging, eating chips.
Yeah.
And so there is, I know we're running out of time, but that's for me is an incredibly important conversation that Kerry and I want to open up. You know, with links to mental health issues and the rising stress for people, anxiety, depression, all these things that are kind of, if you like, formed as a trajectory as we move into adulthood. And if we can't really understand what confidence is and isn't, that could significantly impact where we may or may not take our lives into the workplace, into businesses, into our ability to be leaders or hold senior positions, if that's what you want, or just how confident you turn up each day into work. So I think it's really, really important that Kerry and I continue opening up that dialogue and having those conversations, and for people to be doing that at home as well.
Oh, amazing. Gosh, so good. I mean, and you're right. It's such a timely topic. There's so much we could unpack here, but obviously, as you say, we probably need to kind of wind this up. I just wanted to thank you again so much for your time and your input and your knowledge and your wisdom that you've shared with us today. And if people want to know a bit more about you or how to find the next edition of the Two Coach Confidence podcast, where should we send them?
So the Two Coach Confidence podcast is available on all podcasting platforms. So whether that be in Spotify or Apple or Deezer or Google or whatever your chosen platform is. For more information about me, then you can check out me on any social media under at Kerry Hearsey Coaching, or my website's www.kerryhearsey.com.
Brilliant. And Adam? And
I predominantly hang out on LinkedIn. So if you just type me in, Adam Hulme, so that's Hulme. Feel free to connect with me, ask some questions. I always say this to people, just reach out, ask a question. Just it doesn't matter, just feel free. And then my website is www.mycoachforlife.com. Both Kerry and I have got the podcast on our websites as well. So if you don't currently download or stream, but you still fancy having a listen, you can literally just go onto both our websites and you can stream it straight from the website, because the podcast is on there as well, so easily.
Oh, fantastic. Oh, great. And obviously I will put all these links for people in the resources when we post the interview. So again, thank you, Kerry and Adam, so much for your time today. I hope everyone's enjoyed this fantastic bonus edition of Making Work Work, and we'll see you soon.